Thank you. My name is Julie Curtis. I'm excited to be here today with you. Thank you for joining us to explore alternate visions for making statewide impact with open education. You're in for a treat. Today we have three architects of particularly impactful statewide initiatives. And they've been doing this work long enough that they've learned a lot through the process. And watching these different initiatives grow over time, over the past decade or so, I think Boyoung and I were like trying to figure out how long had it been since we actually knew each other. And I think all of them have been in this work for a decade or more. I've been struck by these very distinct visions that each of them has brought into the context. They are in different political contexts, different systems and resources available to them. And I'm excited to be able to share or have them share their stories with you. There's a lot that all of us can learn from each other in this process. But first, let's see. Oh, actually, I should mention their names. Amy Hofer from Open Oregon Educational Resources, Boyoung Chae from Washington State Board for Community and Technical Colleges, and then TJ Bliss from Idaho State Board of Education. Before we get started, though, we want to hear a little bit about you and help that set the context for our session as well. So there are two questions. One is just where you're responding from. So tell us your place. And then the second one is on a 1 to 5 scale, to what extent is state or system level support or provincial support driving momentum for open education in your region? So I'm going to shift over here to the results. All right, I'll give that just a moment. We have more than 4 people here. So whether you're online or whether you're joining us in the room. Oh, sorry, you need the access information. Okay, here we go. Give me a thumbs up when you've been able to get it. All right. We're good. Yes. The code, okay. Okay, apologies. There's always something, right? Okay, use the QR code. All right, we've got a couple more people. All right, let me jump over. All right, we have some local from Providence, Portugal, doing the kind of the long distance. Virginia, Illinois, Vermont, Tulsa, Chelsea, Minnesota, Colorado, Michigan, Virginia, Florida, Kansas. Great, thank you for that. And now let's see, the next slide. To what extent is state or system level support driving momentum? And so here we have an interesting mix. So we have people for whom very little is coming, and then others kind of a nice distribution. So we've got folks who have a lot of strong momentum coming from that direction. So we will be eager to invite some of your participation and comments as well, recognizing there's a lot of great experience for this in the room. Let me go back over to the slides. Thank you for taking a moment to share. So when higher education systems and consortia support open education, it does a few things. So first off, it adds a lot of complexity, but it also helps deal with the complexity of bringing the power of open into individual institutions and down to individual faculty and the student impacts. There's huge potential for sharing and collaboration, for iterating and building on the work of others. It can create tremendous momentum, and also it creates potential opportunities for scaling and for efficiencies. These are not simple things to do. These are actually very complex things to do. And as the next slide attests, every instance is going to look a little bit different. There is not a one size fits all. answer to how to do this. And so what we'll hear about today are three very distinct visions and different models that are a great fit for the context and for the circumstances, the resources and opportunities available in the states of Washington, Oregon, and Idaho. I don't know if there's anything special about the Pacific Northwest. We could have BC campus up here too, sitting there on top. But there's a lot of diversity represented here as well, and despite the geographic closeness. So we'll look forward to hearing more about that. So we're going to hear from our panelists. First, we'll hear from Amy, then Boyoung, and then TJ. So Amy, go ahead and take it away.
Thanks, Julie, and hi, everybody. I'm Amy Hofer, Statewide Open Education Program Director with Open Oregon Educational Resources. And just very broadly, we basically do three different things. One is that we have a community of practice. Oregon's a national leader in open education because of our well-developed community of practice. And just a note about that, we are not in a system. So we have 24 community colleges and universities. We have a higher education coordinating commission that coordinates, but not being in a system, for me, this is a familiar role as a librarian of leading by persuasion. So yes, other librarians are in the room. So there is an OER point person at each of our institutions that I'm in contact with. And we also have participation in our statewide program at all 24 institutions. That is really important to me. I would not feel that the program was a success unless we had participation at all of our institutions. The second thing we do is we offer professional development regularly throughout the year for folks to learn about OER and how they can jump in and get involved. So we offer OER review workshops using the Open Education Network model. We have equity and open education faculty cohorts, and we also have a version of that for teaching and learning support folks. This was developed by Jen Claudini at Portland Community College, and then we scaled it to go statewide. We offer a modifying and creating OER workshop that was adapted from a workshop created by Ariana Santiago at the University of Houston. We have an open application process where faculty can apply for grants to adopt, adapt, and create OER. And then we also offer webinars, and every other year we have a statewide symposium. We try to participate as a state to celebrate Open Education Week. There's a lot going on, and we really try to make sure that we're offering on-ramps for beginners throughout the year. It's really important to be able to keep on inviting new people in. And then the third thing we do is we offer policy support. So we work with each community college and university to implement our legislative requirements that we have in Oregon and assess their impacts. And in particular, there are three policies. One is a requirement to have a no-cost and low-cost schedule designation. The second is to have a textbook affordability plan. And the third is to report course materials adoptions on time, meaning with enough time for the bookstore to share the no-cost and low-cost information when registration opens for the next term. So these are the kinds of policies that we're offering support for. And then in response to Julie's prompt that she gave us about thinking about a watershed moment, I wanted to share a little bit about our trajectory. And I'm exemplifying it with this slide, which is a photo of an adorable snail with a little number 13 racing card on its back, and it's racing really slowly towards a tiny finish line, because that's how it feels when you're in the middle of doing all this work. It's really incremental. I see a lot of heads nodding. So it's really slow, and creating change is slow. Governments are slow, institutions are slow, and getting out of this pandemic also feels really slow and ongoing. So I want to normalize that it's incremental, it's nonlinear when you're in the middle of things. And when I talk to people, usually the first thing they say is like kind of apologetically that they're behind where everybody else is. And I'm like, well, that's logistically not possible. We can't all be behind, right? So everyone feels that way. And I just want to emphasize that time is a very important piece of what we do in terms of relationship building and in terms of assessment. So as Julie mentioned, I've been doing this work for almost 10 years. I started in 2015, and that first year I offered a really small amount of grant funding. In its first year, it saved students $77,000. And the last time I checked in 2023, that savings had multiplied by 8. So that is really huge. Like every dollar that we're spending now has a ripple effect into the future and an impact on students. Another example of time being a really important factor, I'll check in with someone and they'll say for years, like, oh yeah, I took that workshop and then nothing happened. And then suddenly they'll say like, yeah, I adopted OER and I persuaded my entire department to also adopt OER, right? So these impacts can come all of a sudden and unexpectedly. So I think that, so what Julie asked us to think about was a watershed moment. And it came very early on for me in the first year that I was just sort of getting an inkling of what this program would be. And it was a realization that, well, especially since at the time I was the only person in the program, and that I was able to create that program culture and the workplace culture that I would be in. And so I made a decision, a really deliberate decision, that our culture would be welcoming, encouraging, we would praise people, we would meet people where they are. It was really different from other workplaces that I had been in the past. So for me, that watershed moment was that realization, because things do take such a long time. And so we really want to, have these positive relationships with the people that we're working with and our colleagues while we're doing this really incremental work. So with that, I'll pass it on to Boyoung.
Hello. So my name is Boyoung. I'm a Policy Associate of Open Education from the Washington State Board for Community and Technical Colleges. We are the state government agency that supports Washington's 34 two-year public colleges. So before we share the open education infrastructure that we built in our system, I wanted to take you to a little journey that we took for the past 13 years or so, just to explain how we arrived here. And I think it will offer much more context to you guys. So it all started in 2011 when we secured a small grant from the Gates Foundation and the Washington State Legislature called Open Course Library to develop some of the open course packages for high enrollment courses. And that project ended in 2013, leaving us a huge set of lessons and also exposed our system to the world of open education. One of the key lessons that we learned was that OER adoption simply cannot happen without corresponding professional development efforts. So we built like OER resource hub and started offering this OER one-on-one training. And so far we have trained over 4,000 faculty members, and we actually stopped counting a few years ago at that point. And then, so through that training, OER became a norm of conversation because we now have thousands of faculty members who know exactly what they are and how to find and how to apply them to a teaching practice, which helped reduce the amount of confusion and misunderstanding and even anxiety. So it was a huge point for us. And then with that introduction and professional development, we really wanted to figure out then what our next step is. And we decided to conduct a statewide research to learn where we stood, like how faculty members use OER and how they perceive OER, what benefits and challenges they experience with OER and what their needs are. And that was a mixed method research, both quantitative research with 800 faculty members and qualitative research with 60 faculty members. And that resulted in one super comprehensive report. And we were able to make a lot of statewide decisions based on that. And one key finding from that research was that even with OER becoming a norm of our system, OER still seemed to be a random opportunity for the students. So without knowing which course is offered with OER, students have to accidentally stumble upon the courses that are taught with OER. And we saw that as an equity issue. So we started this grand journey to establish a labeling policies that will require our colleges to label the courses that use OER and low-cost materials. So that took about 4 years of effort and 5 statewide surveys, including one student survey, which we received 10,050 responses from our students in just 2 months, which show the passion and level of knowledge of our students in the topic of textbook affordability. So I have a whole thing on the public dashboard, so if anybody wanted to see, let me know. And then, fast forward in 2024, we have 85% of the colleges fully participating in the labeling policy implementation. And because it is integrated into our college's administrative system, we could actually count the total number of class actions labeled and the matching students' enrollment. And based on that calculation, we have every academic year, total amount of student saving is estimated to $20 million, and it is gradually increasing every year. So in just past 2 academic years, student saving has been accumulated to $40 million. And then, so with all of that, excitement created through the labeling policies, those people who are typically out of the OER conversation started, they began to engage. So especially the faculty members in the field of professional technical programs, also known as career technical educations, the machining, welding, trade, automotive, and nursing. Those faculty members said, hey, we wanted to participate in the labeling too, but we got no quality open textbooks to choose from, and we investigated, and it turned out to be true. So we embarked on a journey of this time to create textbooks in those fields, and we were lucky enough to receive the grant from the U.S. Department of Education twice through their FIPSI Open Text Pilot Grant, and we are in the works of developing 13 textbooks, and half of them will be released pretty soon on the press books. And then that's how we designed this infrastructure that we currently have that has all the elements that I mentioned earlier. And we just wanted to make sure that whenever we introduce anything new, it will be within that infrastructure so that it will be cohesive decision and in alignment with the rest of them, and it will sustain one another. And finally, the watershed moment. And as you probably expected, for our system, the watershed moment that changed everything was that moment when we installed the OER and low-cost labeling policies. The primary purpose of doing that was giving students a choice so that they can make informed choices at the end. But also a lot of byproducts happened that we didn't expect, and these are some of those unexpected, shocking, happy byproducts. So first, it integrated the OER into college operations. Before then, OER used to be just one unique, innovative pedagogy that's only considered in the side of instruction. But because this labeling thing happens in the course registrar, which is part of the business office, now the finance office and business office has to be part of this conversation, and it became a larger agenda for the campus that combines both areas, which was such a welcoming change. And then second, it finally brought the students to the center of conversation. In the past, the OER used to be in our system, at least, it was all about providing proper professional development for the faculty members, because if it doesn't work for the faculty members, it will never work for the students, like my very wise colleague Monique will say, sitting right over there. This policy is giving this, empowering our students and making them this powerful client with a buying power. So finally, we came to the point that we always include a student association into the conversation, bring them to the table, and we make the decisions together. And then it gives our student faculty members a chance to finally brag about their effort, recognizing their years on years of effort of providing affordable course materials, because their courses will have much higher visibility in the class search page. And then finally, it provides us much more accurate monitoring of OER. In the past, when somebody asked me, how many students and how many class sections are benefiting from OER, then my answer used to be, I don't know, I really don't. And or I would make some guesstimate based on the small sampling I have. But then now we have population data, and that clearly tells me how many number of class sections labeled with OER or low cost, and a clear number of students who are enrolled in those class sections. I could always make a pretty accurate estimate on student saving. And our plan is to actually connect that data into our system's student achievement data, which will give us much more holistic view on how these policies actually impact on student achievement. And so it's still an ongoing effort, and that's where we're heading. So with that, that's a portion of my presentation, and all of this process has been fully documented. Every single the research effort that I mentioned, our 10-page long policy guidelines. So anyone wanted to, yes. So if anyone wanted to find out, just let me know. Thank you so much.
Everybody, good to see you, friends old and new. I'm TJ Bliss, and I updated my slide just now, so we're gonna reload that because Julie said I could update it all the way up to our presentation. I think it's important to just provide some context and give you a sense. So I'm from Idaho, and Idaho is about the size of Great Britain, with about 68 million fewer people. So it's very big and very remote and very rural. And that impacts how we think about how we serve our students. There are 8 public universities and community colleges, and then a few private institutions. But it's not a big place population-wise. It's a big place geographically. And in fact, it's the biggest state in the lower 48 if you flatten it out because of if you take surface area, which means there are impassable places. It's very difficult to get from place to place at certain times of the year. So just some context as you think about Idaho. I want to start with our watershed moment and give credit where credit's due, and that is not to these two on the slide here, but I think there was a watershed moment that happened because Dr. Lashley and I, Jonathan, who's sitting back there and who created these slides, so attribution to Jonathan, where we both were part of the community, the open education community, nationally, internationally, but not so much in our own state. And Jonathan came to Boise State University and got engaged there and got plugged into an existing community that was already there, and then invited me to participate. The watershed moment that we had, though, was actually when really bad policy was passed that was antithetical to the ethos of OER. It forced faculty to use OER. It was written by people who didn't understand anything about OER, but it seemed like a great idea, probably because Washington and Oregon were doing it and doing it well. Oh, let's do this. And so we tried, and Jonathan particularly tried, to explain how bad this policy was. And then he decided, well, if I can't beat him, I'll join him. And so Jonathan actually came to the State Board of Education, and the person who passed that policy left. And that created a vacancy, which he invited me to apply for. And then suddenly we were there in a place where we could actually think about this strategically, bring the ethos that we have. We're hardly the most important or most representative people working on OER in Idaho. You're hearing from them throughout this conference, actually virtually and in person. But we're in a unique position, and recognize the position that we're in is that we do have influence on policymakers, on government leaders, and on policy itself. But I'll talk about really briefly how we approach open education in Idaho, and that's through building. So building in cultural terms, meaning recognizing and appreciating the existing affinities and organizations and relationships that are already there. There's a group that meets weekly and has met for 9 years, 7 years, something like that. Every Monday, we join that group. And then we keep it alive when people come in and out of it, right? So we can be that convening force or that stability over time. We also try to recognize existing roles, and we're not trying to impose anything on people. There's a great conversation about what if OER is not in your job title or in your job description at all. but you still have a role that you play informally or formally at your institution. We try to uncover those skills and highlight them. And then we try to build in existing initiatives and support them. The outcome here is finding learning about others' interests, right? Really trying to practice openness with people and what they're trying to do. So we also try to build out formal assurances. And that's what policy is. Policy is a formal assurance, an assertive, you can do this. It's a cover for people who don't have it formally built into their assurance, their job assurance, whether it's a job description or a title. The policy can help them. It can point to it and say, hey, this is what we do. So we have two policies. Our section of policy so I work for the State Board of Education, which governs. It's the Board of Governors for all of education in Idaho, K through whatever, and that includes the universities and community colleges. So the policy is binding as law. So we have that advantage. We don't have to work through the legislature on this thing. We can write the policy, which also means bad policy can be passed quickly as well. So policy 3U is really about is instructional materials access and affordability. OER is defined there, but it is not an OER policy. It's about solving a particular issue that our students have around access and affordability. And it requires our institutions, it gives them autonomy, but also some guidance on how to approach this, and requires them to develop plans for increasing that instructional access and affordability. And then policy 3B is about academic freedom and academic responsibility. And those are two separate concepts. And we highlight that in the policy, how you can't have one without the other, or if you do have one without the other, you're out of balance. We also have these common institutional standards through that policy, and then we provided support where we can, including through the Z degree funding or ZTC degree or OER degrees. They're really broader than OER degrees because they're about affordability and access, and so low cost is allowed within those. We're able to get $1 million from the governor for that, advocating for the benefits that we have. And that prioritizes and supports others' goals. And then finally, we build up all educators. So through recognition and awards, through reflective engagement, we do an annual awareness survey with our faculty, and then we do a lot of piloting and professional learning around this. I won't say we are as nearly as strategic as Washington, but we are, in some sense, moving forward through the idea of being building. So there's a strategy, and that is building. We're trying to build. So I'll leave it at that.
All right, here, as we were planning this panel, I said, well, so what should be the first question after these opening remarks? And they said, actually, at that point, we would like to open it up to the audience, both the online audience and the virtual audience. And so with that in mind, we want to invite you to bring your questions, and we have a question in our back pocket if you don't have questions for us. And so, okay, we have, okay, so I will not go to that. Whoops, hold on, sorry. No. Let's, our preference is definitely to go to the open questions. So, and I think, yeah, we need to use the mics here. And
okay. So I'm sorry I distracted you. I was so excited about what you were saying. So I work for, I get very excited. So I work for the Universities of Wisconsin system, and I will be hopefully starting next week a system-wide initiative to do course marking. So you said that it took you 4 years. I have 9 months. So I was really excited when you said that you have documents that you'd be willing to share, but any like super quick advice, because I'm sure I could talk to you about this for hours, but advice for like moving or like getting the ball rolling, getting this done quickly, in terms of recommendations, not mandates from a system level, would be super helpful.
Thank you. Okay. So a good thing is when we were all citing this, like Amy and TJ, there was no system like that. And then it was such a groundbreaking idea that there was no resource. Good thing is you have at least 5-6 other states who have begun the work. And all of us have the matching, the policy guidelines that has a name of the policy, criteria, what to do, what not to do, sample cases, and training videos. I think you could use these resources as potential references and or the references to build your own. And for the Washington, we not only have the comprehensive labeling guide, we have the video tutorial and some kind of the weird application that I made out of Google site that it resembles app, but it's actually a Google form. And so all of these examples are available for you, and or perhaps we could have a conversation after this the session and go over each item and come up with maybe a strategist to begin the work. And I'm really happy and admire your courage to begin the work. I didn't know it would be this expensive work, to be honest. If I knew, I might have had some hesitation, but I thought, why not just putting a code in there and see how it works? And then, wow, yeah. So thank you. Yeah. Yeah.
I wonder if we take us out of this. So one thing to add to that question is for your first year, just call it a benchmark year and ask your institutions to just give you whatever they have. And if they have incomplete or missing data, ask them to share what do you have, and then maybe a few narrative sentences of an explanation of what you don't have and why. So just think of it as a benchmark and let people kind of get started where they are and then take it from there.
I'll add one thing, and you can move the mic probably. We're doing that is just work very closely with your registrars and understand who the people are that are going to have to implement this. So it's a great idea, but it is painful in some cases to implement, especially if you have different SIS and different, systems across the institutions. And I would say start small too, and listen to them. Like, they want to do this. They understand the value of this to students. So it's not something that anybody says, oh, that's a terrible idea, except some faculty. But listen to the people on the tech side and the IT side, and actually stage it in a way that will work. Otherwise, I think you'll just run into frustration. Then they'll get frustrated with the implementation, and that feeds into being frustrated with the idea, which we don't want, because the idea is good.
One last thing that I wanted to add, I'm sorry, because they were sharing such great insight. I thought they inspired me something. Okay, so in this process, you'll face a lot of resistance, and it's a lot of concerns. But then there were two things that helped me go through that those phase, and then they were making sure to keep the whole things data driven. So the reason that I kept running the statewide research one after another is to have the legitimacy and the authority of this move. So anytime that somebody raise questions about why the threshold is set at $50, then I would say that was a result of our student survey that had 10,050 responses. End of the conversation. So it's really critical to keep the process data-driven, not only to have a validity of the decision that you will make, but to, in a way, protect the move, and then to have that authority that you need.
So this question is from our virtual audience, and this is Spencer Ellis. Thank you, Amy, Boyoung, and TJ, who are such great leaders for this state-level OER work. All three of you supported me personally and have made a great impact nationwide with OER. Keep it up. Your OER work has survived several budget scares and challenges. How are you preparing as many states once again prepare for tight budgets in the coming year?
I'll speak to that. We position OER as part of the solution to the tightening of state budgets. And when we talk with legislators, those that want to literally cut funding in Idaho, I don't know if you know that the recent GOP platform includes the statement, public funds should not be used for higher education. The next statement is higher education is critical to our economy, but it shows that there's a faction there. But when we talk with legislators, whether they're on the far right or on the middle left, which is what we have in Idaho, they all understand the value of this work toward improving access and affordability for students, particularly students that have the least access in our state, which happens to be rural white males. Those are the ones that don't go on and increasingly don't want to go on, which increases the problems that we're facing. So if we can present that as a solution to that problem, then they get behind it.
Okay, yeah. Briefly, I have partnered with the Student Association in Oregon, which is sort of going through a transition moment right now, but it's been able to position textbook affordability as among other student needs, including food insecurity, housing, childcare, transportation, and affordable textbooks becomes one of those basic student needs that we're having an emergency about right now in Oregon. So that's our advocacy angle right now.
These two offer such great insight. And honestly, when the tight budget situation happens, I don't have much clear solution either, other than keep applying for the grant and then secure the additional funding from outside. One thing I do try to be mindful about is whenever this financial situation happens, I wanted people to see the OER as part of the solution, as TJ mentioned, and also Amy commented on it. When during the pandemic, at the beginning of the huge migration of all of the courses into online realm, back then I sent out email and calling all the faculty members who have their courses elsewhere to upload their courses into our Canvas Commons, which is an open repository for anyone in the system to download. And then that rally somehow resulted in 600 courses to be all added to our Canvas Commons for everybody to share. So moment like that leaves a trace and memory that how when we put our hands together, we could share this knowledge. And this can be our common asset for all of us to benefit from. So I just trying to stick the idea of open sharing in those moments so that they can remember we are as a part of the solution.
Thank you. Here in front. Oh, sorry.
Sorry. Hi, I'm Dragon Gill. I'm from right here at Rhode Island College. And Rhode Island had a bit of a moment. We had a statewide initiative, but we don't have a state system. We have 3 independent state schools that don't have any infrastructure for working together on any other project, including OER. And I didn't know if you had any thoughts or experiences working with people in other states. Because our initial project was persuasion. Please, everyone, just do this. It would be really cool. And we got really far. But when the small amount of state, sort of infrastructure around that went with Gina Raimondo to Washington, we ended up with kind of nothing to hang us together. And so sort of we're thinking about how to restart and how to make that happen with sort of no place.
None of us want to answer how to be like a system when you have no system or no governing board. I mean, I'll go back to my old refrain, which I think is true, is that champions are everything in this space, and persist and try to, I mean, what happened in Idaho was that people across our institutions, which I know we are a single governing board, but they're all independent institutions in their minds. And so faculty there have no reason to interact with faculty at other institutions in Idaho, really, if they don't want to. And they created a group that just had regular meetings of champions will result in incredible things if you can keep those conversations going. That's the first thing that comes to mind.
We are at time.
Okay. All right. Thank you. We appreciate you being here. There were questions that didn't get answered, and so our audience is here. We might have to move it out into the hall to avoid conflicting with the folks coming in. The other thing, on that last thing, about a community of practice or to keep the conversation going, talk to Jonathan Lashley. Jonathan, would you raise your hand there? He's an expert at that in particular, so have a conversation with him about that. Thank you.
Please end the recording for It's Time to Think Big. We will prepare for the next 2:15 session called Project Management Approaches for Statewide OER Projects.